of Windy Poplars, Chapter 2. Extracts from various letters from the same to the same. September 26th. Do you know where I go to read your letters? Across the road into the grove. There's a little dell there where the sun dapples the ferns. A brook meanders through it. There's a twisted mossy tree trunk on which I sit, and the most delightful row of young sister birches. After this, when I have a dream of a certain kind, a golden green crimson veined dream, a very dream of dreams, I shall please my fancy with the belief that it came from my secret dell of birches and was born of some mystic union between the slenderest, airiest of the sisters and the crooning brook. I love to sit there and listen to the silence of the grove. Have you ever noticed how many different silences there are, Gilbert? The silence of the woods, of the shore, of the meadows, of the night, of the summer afternoon. All different because all the undertones that thread them are different. I'm sure if I were totally blind and insensitive to heat and cold, I could easily tell just where I was by the quality of the silence around me. School has been keeping for 2 weeks now, and I've got things pretty well organized. But Mrs. Braddock was right. The Pringles are my problem, and as yet I don't see exactly how I'm going to solve it in spite of my lucky clovers. As Mrs. Braddock says, they are as smooth as cream and as slippery. The Pringles are a kind of clan who keeps tabs on each other and fight a good bit among themselves, but stand shoulder to shoulder in regard to any outsider. I have come to the conclusion that there are just 2 kinds of people in Summerside, those who are Pringles and those who aren't. My room is full of Pringles, and a good many students who bear another name have Pringle blood in them. The ringleader of them seems to be Jen Pringle, a green-eyed bantling who looks as Becky Sharp must have looked at 14. I believe she is deliberately organizing a subtle campaign of insubordination and disrespect, with which I'm going to find it is hard to cope. She has a knack of making irresistibly comic faces, and when I hear smothered ripple of laughter running over the room from behind my back, I know perfectly well what has caused it. But so far I haven't been able to catch her out in it. She has brains too, the little wretch. Can write compositions that are 4th cousins to literature, and is quite brilliant in mathematics, woe is me. There's a certain sparkle in everything she says or does, and she has a sense of humorous situations which would be a bond of kinship between us if she hadn't started out by hating me. As it is, I fear it will be a long time before Jen and I can laugh together over anything. Myra Pringle, Jen's cousin, is the beauty of the school, and apparently stupid. She does perpetrate some amusing howlers, as for instance, when she said today in history class that Indians thought Champlain and his men were gods or something inhuman. Socially, the Pringles are what Rebecca Dew calls the elite of Summerside. Already I've been invited to 2 Pringle homes for supper, because it's the proper thing to invite a new teacher to supper, and the Pringles are not going to omit the required gestures. Last night I was at James Pringle's, the father of aforesaid Jen. He looks like a college professor, but is in reality stupid and ignorant. He talked a great deal about discipline, tapping the tablecloth with a finger the nail of which was not impeccable, and occasionally doing dreadful things to grammar. The Summerside High had always required a firm hand, an experienced teacher, male preferred. He was afraid that I was a little too young, a fault of which time will cure all too soon, he said sorrowfully. I didn't say anything, because if I had said anything, I might have said too much. So I was as smooth and creamy as any Pringle of them all could have been, and contented myself with looking limpidly at him and saying inside of myself, "You cantankerous, prejudiced old creature." Jen must have got her brains from her mother, whom I found myself liking. Jen, in her parents' presence, was a model of decorum. But though her words were polite, her tone was insolent. Every time she said, "Miss Shirley," she contrived to make it sound like an insult. And every time she looked at my hair, I felt it was just plain carroty red. No Pringles, I am certain, would ever admit it was auburn. I like the Morton Pringles much better, though Morton Pringle never really listens to anything you say. He says something to you, and then while you're replying, he is busy thinking out his next remark. Mrs. Stephen Pringle, the widow Pringle, Summerside abounds in widows, wrote me a letter yesterday. A nice, polite, poisonous letter. Millie has too much homework. Millie is a delicate child and must not be overworked. Mr. Bell never gave her homework. She's a sensitive child that must be understood. Mr. Bell understood her so well. Mrs. Stephen is sure I will too if I try. I do not doubt Mrs. Stephen thinks I made Adam Pringle's nose bleed in class today, by reason of which he had to go home. And I woke up last night and couldn't go to sleep again because I remembered an I hadn't dotted in a question I wrote on the board. I'm certain Jen Pringle would notice it, and a whisper will go around the clan about it. Rebecca Dew says that all Pringles will invite me to supper except the old ladies at Maplehurst, and then ignore me forever afterwards, as they are the elite. This may mean socially I may be banned in Summerside. Well, we'll see. The battle is on, but is not yet either won nor lost. Still, I feel rather unhappy over it all. You can't reason with prejudice. I'm still just as I used to be in my childhood. I can't bear to have people not liking me. It isn't pleasant to think that the families of half my pupils hate me, and for no fault of my own. It is the injustice that stings me. There go more italics, but a few italics really do relieve your feelings. Apart from the Pringles, I like my pupils very much. There are some clever, ambitious, hard-working ones who are really interested in getting an education. Lewis Allen is paying for his board by doing housework at his boarding house and isn't a bit ashamed of it. And Sophie Sinclair rides bareback on her father's old gray mare 6 miles in and 6 miles out every day. There's pluck for you. If I can help a girl like that, am I to mind the Pringles? The trouble is, if I can't win the Pringles, I won't have much chance of helping anybody. But I love Windy Poplars. It isn't a boarding house, it's a home. And they like me. Even Dusty Miller likes me, though he sometimes disapproves of me and shows it by deliberately sitting with his back turned towards me, occasionally cocking a golden eye over his shoulder at me to see how I'm taking it. I don't pet him much when Rebecca Dew is around, because he really does irritate her. By day, he is a homely, comfortable, meditative animal, but he is decidedly a weird creature at night. Rebecca says it is because he is never allowed to stay out after dark. She hates to stand in the backyard and call him. She says the neighbors will be laughing at her. She calls in such fierce stentorian tones that she really can be heard all over the town on a single night shouting, "Puss! Puss! Puss!" The widows would have a conniption if Dusty Miller wasn't in when they went to bed. Nobody knows what I've gone through on account of that cat. Nobody, Rebecca has assured me. The widows are going to wear well. Every day I like them better. Aunt Kate doesn't believe in reading novels, but informs me that she does not propose to censor my reading matter. Aunt Chatty loves novels. She has a hidey-hole where she keeps them. She smuggles them in from the town library together with a pack of cards for solitaire and anything else she doesn't want Aunt Katie to see. It is in a chair seat which nobody but Aunt Chatty knows is more than a chair seat. She has shared the secret with me because, I strongly suspect, she wants me to aid and abet her in aforesaid smuggling. There shouldn't really be any need for hidey-holes at Windy Poplars, but I never saw a house with so many mysterious cupboards. Though, to be sure, Rebecca Dew won't let them be mysterious. She's always cleaning them out ferociously. A house can't keep itself clean, she says sorrowfully when either of the widows protests. I'm sure she would make short work of a novel or a pack of cards if she found them. They are both a horror to her orthodox soul. Rebecca Dew says cards are the devil's books and novels are even worse. The only things Rebecca Dew ever reads, apart from her Bible, are the society columns of the Montreal Guardian. She loves to pore over the houses and the furniture and the doings of millionaires. Just fancy soaking in a golden bathtub, Miss Shirley, she said wistfully. But she's really an old duck. She has produced from somewhere a comfortable old wing chair of faded brocade that just fits my kinks and says, "This is your chair. We'll keep it for you." And she won't let Dusty Miller sleep on it lest I get hairs on my school skirt and give the Pringles something to talk about. The whole three are very much interested in my circlet of pearls and what it signifies. Aunt Kate showed me her engagement ring. She can't wear it because it has grown too small, set with turquoises. But poor Aunt Chatty owned to me with tears in her eyes that she had never had an engagement ring. Her husband thought it an unnecessary expenditure. She was in my room at the time giving her face a bath in buttermilk. She does it every night to preserve her complexion and has sworn me to secrecy because she doesn't want Aunt Kate to know it. She would think it ridiculous vanity in a woman my age. And I'm sure Rebecca Dew thinks that no Christian woman should try to be beautiful. I used to slip down to the kitchen to do it after Kate had gone to sleep, but I was always afraid of Rebecca Dew coming down. She has ears like cats, even when she's asleep. If I could just slip in here every night and do it. Oh, thank you, my dear. I have found out a little about our neighbors at the Evergreens. Mrs. Campbell, who was a Pringle, is 80. I haven't seen her, but from what I can gather, she's a very grim old lady. She has a maid, Martha Monkman, almost as ancient and as grim as herself, who is generally referred to as Mrs. Campbell's woman. And she has her great-granddaughter, little Elizabeth Grayson, living with her. Elizabeth, on whom I have never laid eyes in spite of my 2 weeks' sojourn, is 8 years old and goes to the public school by the back way, a shortcut through the backyards, so I never encounter her, coming or going. Her mother, who is dead, was a granddaughter of Mrs. Campbell, who brought her up also, her parents being dead. She married a certain Pierce Grayson, a Yankee, as Mrs. Rachel Lynde would say. She died when Elizabeth was born, and as Pierce Grayson had to leave America at once to take charge of a branch of his firm's business in Paris, the baby was sent home to old Mrs. Campbell. The story goes that he couldn't bear the sight of her because she had cost her mother's life and has never taken any notice of her. This, of course, may be sheer gossip because neither Mrs. Campbell nor the woman ever opens her lips about him. Rebecca Dew says they are far too strict with little Elizabeth, and she hasn't much of a time of it with them. She isn't like other children, far too old for 8 years. The things that she says sometimes. "Rebecca," she says to me one day, "suppose just as you were ready to get into bed, you felt your ankle nipped." No wonder she's afraid to go to bed in the dark, and they make her do it. Mrs. Campbell says there are to be no cowards in her house. They watch her like two cats watching a mouse and boss her within an inch of her life. If she makes a speck of noise, they nearly pass out. It's hush, hush all the time. I tell you that child is being hush, hushed to death, and what is to be done about it? What indeed? I feel like I'd like to see her. She seems to me a bit pathetic. Aunt Kate says she's well looked after from a physical point of view. What Aunt Kate really said was, they feed her and dress her well. But a child can't live by bread alone. I can never forget what my own life was like before I came to Green Gables.